Yeah. Dealing with professional ethics, we're looking at some key light bulb words, which is respect, principles, integrity, and honesty. And when you're looking at professional work ethics, these are the key drivers when you're looking at professional work ethics. So you're looking at safety, productivity, quality, and personal integrity. So kind of how we were going through the scenario of, as Perry was mentioning, about having a company credit card. So that would actually be, having personal integrity, because the company has entrusted you with this plastic. Don't burn the plastic off the card now. So they have entrusted you to be a responsible adult, to be able to follow the guidelines when it comes to using your company's credit card. And if in doubt, they will list a series of things in the employee handbook, or they'll reference you to a certain section, if there's the intranet type of setup, to that policy that deals with using company credit card. But you need to exhibit personal integrity when you're in possession of the company credit card or anything that deals with the company, money, or just your general appearance. I have worked at a crane manufacturing and service company, and we literally sent mechanics, offshore mechanics, to training in Oklahoma. So we would always, it was 4 of them. And there was one that was listed to pick up the rental car. So apparently, after work, or after the training, they decided to go hang out at a bar. Nothing wrong with that. But when you start drinking to the point of being belligerent, and you start fist fighting the other person,
just a plug.
and then you decide to drive the truck, the rental.
So you find them?
And you turn it over 3 times.
Email.
Let's just say that employee no longer works for the company.
Dominique.
So as you go
Sydney.
back to decision making,
Jabria.
looking at some poor choices here. He was making some poor decisions.
Jada.
Alcohol has a tendency of inhibiting your
You have a key,
abilities
right?
to make conscious and accurate decisions. One thing I will suggest to everyone here, if there is a company party of any kind, which there will be, do not drink.
Heavy. Don't drink heavy.
Well, this is true. I forgot, everybody is not gonna be in HR. Usually, when HR rolls on the scene, you would not find us, at least this HR person, you will not find me drinking at a company social event.
Sorry, I'm not of the obstinate person, sorry.
Perry, on the other hand, will indulge, but that's okay, I got his back.
Don't drink heavy. You gotta know your limits.
He may have one glass, I stick to the
Just know
water.
your limits.
Here we go, let's stick to the water. Y'all not gonna give me in some scandalous situation where Dr. Minor jumping on a table dancing.
Well,
No. So, these are the things that you have to be conscious of. So in that scenario that I just gave to you, the person did not exhibit personal integrity nor safety. Because there were 3 other people with this one employee. So you not only started a brawl at a bar, you wrecked a rental car. So the company had to pick the tab up on replacing the rental car. We only have 1 employee that was fired and 3 other ones that were reprimanded because you should have known better. You should have tapped your buddy and been like,
let's go home.
let's go. We gotta go. So even though that wasn't on social media, it's still a full representation of XYZ company when you send people for training.
Or you have to leave. So person doesn't want to leave, you have to say, I've done my duty to try to convince you to do the right thing. You're not gonna do the right thing. You know, I'm not going down with the Titanic.
That's right.
Right, so I opt out. Same thing I talked earlier about you making decisions earlier in your life to leave the situation.
Right.
Opt out of the situation.
Mhm.
That's always your individual choice, to opt out of the situation.
Because the three of them, one of those other three should have picked up their cell phone and been like, Miss Jacqueline, we've got a situation. What do I need to do? Okay, you want me to take the rental car keys from him? Well, he's the one that's supposed to be driving, no?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna give me authorization to drive around? Yes, okay. All right. The other two fellas? No, they haven't called you. Well, they're standing right here. So, what they're gonna do, guys, what y'all doing? Oh, okay, Dr. Brown, they said that they'll come with me. Okay. So, oh, John, they arrested him. Oh, okay, just tell them to, oh, you don't want to accept collect calls from the county jail? He needs to call his mother. Oh, okay. Hey, John, you're gonna have to call your house, call your mama. They're not gonna bail you out. Oh, okay, that's fine. So we can go now? Okay, now, that was an easy phone call that they could have reached out to HR, or they could have contacted their manager. We have account managers when we deal with also. But they needed to have phoned home, as I tell them. If you got a problem, phone home. So you end up in a situation with other people. You have to make a decision what you're gonna do for yourself. That's
For
very
yourself.
specific.
Yes.
Because just like with this one person, the one person individual who was fist fighting was fired, but the other three got reprimanded because they didn't do anything. So then when it comes to quality, if you have let's say if you're in shipping, receiving supply chain, for instance, or you're making widgets, for instance, or if Kiri is in the lab making a potion of sorts, or trying to find the secret to curing cancer, you always want to make sure that you provide a quality product, whether it's a report, a widget that you're making, if you're a machinist, or a chemical compound in Kiri situations. Always want to make sure you give quality work to your employers, because that shows personal integrity. And also with productivity. So all of these are good key drivers in regards to your professional work ethic. Having a good professional work ethic, people will recognize you for that. And when they do, they know that you can be dependable. And also if you possess leadership qualities. So everybody in here is being trained to be a leader or have qualities of such. So that way, when it comes around for promotion time, I look on my checklist saying, Marvell is on my list. You know what? He's always on time. He produces quality work. He has high productivity. And he always works safely. I think I'm gonna give him a raise and a promotion.
Dr. Ryan, can I talk on the quality thing for a second?
Yes, go right ahead.
So, as you all go into like a office, career, whatever setting, right? To me, the quality, the productivity, all of that stuff is gonna go to a different level. So let me just talk about, let's just go back to the time when you were in your college, you're still in there, right? You're working in projects with other individuals. Other individual has some level of substandard work. They're on your team. You have a team project, right? If your name is associated with that team project, the result of that team project is associated with you, right? So when you're working in a team, this is just one of the nuances of teams is, it's great when the entire team is operating on a high level of quality, a high level of awareness of safety, a high level of, we want to like pump out the most widgets ever, right? It's okay, but sometimes when you're in the middle of that, you're doing the preservation of yourself and your contribution to that team, right? So one of the things you will be, again, part of this part about professional work ethic is, what do I do when I'm on the team when my team hasn't taken the time to make sure that the quality of the work is at the level? In college, you're like, okay, I'm okay if I get a C. I'm maxed out, right? I'm gonna get this paper turned in, and I'm okay if I get a C. So we make those decisions, right? So professional level, another different game, right? I don't know where my work is going to go. My work may end up on the CEO's desk, right? That someone, if you're in a smaller organization, the CEO may come by and go, hey, Angelo, I saw your report. I have a question for you, right? Well, you're an intern, that doesn't matter. No, you're a new hire, doesn't matter. You're part of that organization, you are part of quality, safety of the widgets that are being made in that organization. What is your level of contribution? You own that, right? If I used to have my buddies at work used to say, Perry, you work long hours. We understand that you work really slow, that's why you have to work long hours, but that was just a running joke. But you have to be willing to stay in the game long as it needs to for the output of your work to be at the level that's on point. I'm going to say that again. Stay in the game long enough for the output of your work to be on point. Okay? There are C's and B's and D's in corporate America. And those are the people that when we go through reductions in headcounts, are the first people to go away from the organization. Okay? So you want to be known for high level of output here, right? And now I'm going to take this down a road that is appropriate for this group. Okay? You're going into a situation, on some level, there may be people already there who don't think you can deliver quality anyway. Are you listening to me? There are people who think you can't deliver quality. You're not built to deliver quality. You are substandard. Mental capacity, all that stuff. You have to be able to stay in the game long enough to do the work so the output is on point. And so this is the level where you're going into. All the work that we talked about this morning about what we want things to be in 5 years, it's about work that's done every day. It's not about some magical thing that happens 5 years later. It's about the grind every day for 5 years. Okay? So just be aware of the quality. I will tell you, I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. One of our partners asked me about a student's writing skills. What is the quality of that student's writing skills? Like, I don't really know what the quality of the student's writing skill. Okay. What I do know is that that lady right there and that lady right there, if I write anything, they are reading it to make sure it's on point. Because they are sticklers for it. So my writing skills have gotten better because I have people who can help me improve my writing skills. That is what this organization is all about. That is what the person sitting across from you at the table here is all about. Helping us collectively get to some level of excellence. Okay? But you have to stay in the game and put the work in so the output that you're going to is at the level you want it to be. Not just C level, but A+ level. That's what's at stake for you. All right. So this is, I don't want to be passive about, the conversation here, because when we talked about, if you read the Striving While Black, right? When you read that text, it talks about being a reliable source, supplier of whatever. That's about quality of work. That's about productivity. That's about, hey, every time I give Keegan something, it comes back better than I imagined I was going to get it to begin with. Right? So of course, when I have a big project coming up, who do I want on my team? Right? I always take all this stuff back to in the playground, you're playing dodge the ball. You're the captain and you start to pick your team. Who are you picking? Right? Reliable, quality, productive, right? Fantasy football players, what are you picking your team for? You're not picking them because of the color of their jersey, you're picking them because of the output. What you think they can do to perform. That is about quality, productivity, right? And consistent performance. Right? And if you peel that onion back, those people have been doing the work that we talked about, the 10,000 hours, which is working at their craft to improve their craft at a level that they can deliver that consistency.
Compare it too with the author, Plumman. I was actually listening on the webinar where you had him talking about Striving While Black. And I thought it was a good point that he made in regards to working, was he still working at Crash?
No, he's the chairman of our board.
No, what I'm saying during that time.
Oh, sure, the whole book was, yeah, we were all there.
So he gave an example, for those of you that were not on there, that when he was working at Kraft Foods, he literally was like working hours from 8 to 5. And correct me if I'm wrong.
This is the plant where you work
The
there.
plant.
Yeah.
So he noticed that when he got there, the parking lot was full. So I think he asked
I was one of the leaders there.
hey, I noticed, I get here at 8 and the parking lot is like full. He said, oh yeah, we started, was it 6:30?
6:30.
6:30.
Yeah.
So what did he decide to do? He got there at 6:30.
Yeah.
And he worked till 5.
Yeah, the office hours, you were told we are open from 8 to 5. So we showed up 8 to 5. The culture was 6:30 is when the real people work. Right. When the people who are on point about their business, they arrive at 6:30.
Right.
Right? And they're sitting at their desks with an hour and a half worth of work done when they see you pulling up in your car. Strolling in. All right? And those are the people that are not going to pick you for their team because they don't think you are ready to do that extra work that needs to be done to be on point. Right? And the moment the 8 o'clock person has a typo or something out of whack or misses a deadline, you're like, see?
Right.
They don't practice hard.
Right.
They don't practice at all. They don't put in the work.
Right. And this other point too was about learning the culture. every company that you go into is going to have a different culture. So in this instance, the culture was, you come in at 6:30 instead of 8 to 5. So he wanted to be one of those people that had a high work ethic. So he decided to follow suit, and he came in at 6:30. Because that's the culture. So to have something, you have to work at it. Can't be afraid of work.
So the other thing I will give everybody in the room props for, because we've been pushing you all. You have all been going through various processes, right? We've ripped your resumes apart. We've had you redo them. We've been in your face about getting on LinkedIn profiles done, or you're ready for interviews and all that stuff. I will say that I'm most proud that you all are owning all the work that you need to do, right? So you can continue to be coachable and open. I will say that one of the things that's a detriment to anyone's career is when you get to the point where people deem you as not coachable, you're lost. They're not going to give you anything if you're defensible. If you're defensive and don't respond, or you don't take it in and do something with it. If your friend like, oh, tell me about this. And if I tell you about it, how are you going to react? If you react in a way that I can visibly see you have responded to the feedback that I gave to you, then I am more than likely going to give you more feedback, right? It's going to be okay, because it's not going to be painful for me to tell you what's wrong with you, right? If you make it painful for people to give you feedback, they are not going to endure the pain to make you better, right? So own it, continuing to own it. Like I said, I've been very impressed with everyone's, willingness to dig in and do what they need to do. And, reach out, ask for feedback. That's one of the things also in Striving While Black. But if you ask for the feedback and don't do anything with it, the people you're asking for feedback will go, like, why am I giving you this? You're not doing anything with it. Are you just coming to me to hear my voice? Or is this meaningful? So, good points on how you operate.
So does anyone else have any questions? That ends my portion of the presentation. I know that Perry is going to go over.
We're going to get into some PI stuff.
PI. So I'm going to ask someone.
So,
any questions, anybody, before?
Akeem, Juan, Jabria, several of you, I could not find your placard, so we emailed them to you. So if anyone doesn't have a paper placard, we should have sent it to you. If you don't have your email to you, then let me know that. Everybody found it? So I want to talk about sort of natural wiring, right? So everybody here has done predictive index. And so we've talked about predictive index for most people. There are a few students here who today is the first time they're here in PI, and that's just the speed at which we're running at the moment, but we're going to get caught up. So we talked about PI, and we talked about, this sort of natural selection or your preferred way of doing things, right? And so, is that off?
It does get cut off on the.
Okay.
On the
Can we, aspect, like, get it to 90% or something? See if we can catch that.
We can try.
So everybody's got their placard, right? And so we didn't do a lot of work on the factor combinations and all of that stuff. I want to touch on a little bit of that. And I want to touch on this a little bit because, again, our objective is that everybody here is going to be working somewhere in a field that they hope to work in when they're in their career, right? So we're starting to put you under more stress with more consequences at hand, right? And that then challenges our ability to, how do we make decisions under stress? How do we deal with conflict, right? So we talked about some of those elements in our last class. And so I wanted to just spend a minute of time talking about, there are 17 reference profiles. So you've got all the reference profiles on a sheet that's been sent to you. And everybody should have their placket with their reference profile on it. And so all the profiles, like individuals, we talked about in, I believe it was the last class and maybe the class before, where we were talking about conflict and the various types of conflict and how do we deal with them, okay? So I want to just talk about this whole thing around decision-making and, you know, looking at your natural behaviors and how you make decisions, and then how you may be pushed outside of your comfort zone, if you will, to do things a little bit different, right? So, I'm gonna go forward. So, this is factor A, right? On everybody's profile on your placard, you look at either to the right of the, I'm sorry, I'm holding my left hand, saying to the right. To the left of the midpoint is what we talk about is the low factor. To the right is the high factor, right? So if you look at that midpoint, that little black dot that's in the middle of your placard, if you're to the right of it, you're on the high amount, right? So these are the things around your dominance factor that would describe low over here, right? So if I think about decision-making for someone who's on the right-hand side, high amount, right? This is the kind of person who is, I got what I got, I'm moving forward, and I'm kind of on my own, right? This is sort of the world that I live in. So my factor is on the right side, and it's let me take charge of things and drive things, right? Someone who's on this side is going to be more cooperative and supportive and seeking to work with other people, more collaborative. So when I think about a decision-making on this side, it is, let me go get other people involved in the process so that I have data points to then help me make that decision. Right? So if you're in a project and someone's saying, hey, you are the person now responsible for that project to come up with an idea or to lead it, the people on this side, high factor, that's in their wheelhouse, right? If you're on the low side of it, it is, the question's going to be, who can I talk to figure out, to get more data and more input for me to get help with this, right? So if you know this about yourself, then this is where, I forget what the name of the game show, we have Lifeline, where you can call someone, right? You need to have people or resources, whether it is, I use Google. Now, I use Google quite a bit if I'm trying to solve something. It's my way of doing my research, okay, on my own, right? You can use Google as your resource. It's like, hey, I'm gonna go talk to my worldwide posse, right? To help me understand what this thing is. If I'm inside a company and I need to understand how that company operates, then, I need to figure out in that company, who can I go to help me figure this piece out, okay? So that means that these low factor on the A side are going to also just naturally be more engaging and connecting with people as well. So leverage those opportunities. Even if it is your project to lead, then I would be asking my boss or supervisor, do not be afraid to say, who can I talk to give me more input, or to help me understand better what my project is, right? So this is where you would have to speak up and say, where do I get this connection from, right? What you don't want to do is wait for someone to come to tell you, here are the people for you to get this done, because you've already been delegated the project, right? They're saying, hey, we want you to take a lead. We want to see what you do with this particular project, right? So that means you taking charge of it. And if you're more collaborative in nature, that's fine. Just figure out where you get that input from those other people, okay? So this is the B factor. So again, right side of the placard is going to be the high side. Low side is going to be the left side. This is also an energy and a connection point, right? So this is people on this side, are definitely going to be those that are going to easy to get to know, easy to connect. Always looking to reach out to other people, right? As you see the words that are listed here. This side, if you were given a project that says, we need you to go connect with a group of people and figure out X, Y, Z, you have to put your personality hat on, because that's the nature of the project. That's not how you're naturally wired. You're naturally introspective, reflective, pensive, imaginative, and analytical, yes. Okay? So once you get the data, you can do things with it. However, you're going to go inside. And if your project requires you to go outside to get that data, you have to figure out how to go make those connections to get that done. Right? So this is just the way of understanding how you wired, what your task is, and how do you go after it. Okay. Patience. So right side, left side again. High amount factor, patient, stable, calm. This side, intense, restless, driving, rushed, brisk, right? So I have a project. It needs to be done in 2 weeks. My natural style is stable and calm, right? I need to understand that I only have 2 weeks, right? I don't have 4 weeks or 6 weeks, which is what is comfortable for me to approach my work. So I need to understand that I'm going to have to stretch outside of my comfort zone, because I have been given a directive that says the outcome for this is 2 weeks. Right? So that direction is a pressure prompted, right? So I have to put that in perspective. So if I'm that planful, I need to organize it, create steps. I have to jump on that and figure out within that 2-week period of time, how I'm going to go through my natural process of planning and organizing to get that done. Okay. Now, on the low factor, this is 2-week project. Okay, jump in. Okay. On this side, you jump in and you're all over the place. You still got 2 weeks. Right? So if you have a process of like, I'm gonna go jump in the pool and I'll figure out if it's water or jello. Okay, you have to go through that process again to figure out quickly what are those things, right? So this style is gonna be more of like, I'm just gonna get in there, test some things out, and figure it out sensory as I go along, okay? I can get that done, but sometimes jumping in, this style is gonna jump in more than likely without a well-defined plan. That is one of the downsides of, jumping in first, right? So many of them, this is me. Jump in, I have an idea, I have a concept, I think I know what I'm gonna get done, and as I get in, I am going to figure it out as I go. If I have a short leash and something I have to deliver a result, this is where, for those of you who have this style, will find yourself the night before something is due going like, all right, I'm at the end. What's it gonna be? Right? Because you pushed yourself in doing so many different things that you're trying to figure out where you go with it. Okay? Just know your style in a work setting, again, just like at school or other projects, understand what the deadlines are, understand what the expectations are, so that then you can adjust your personal style to achieve that task. Right? Formality. So this is factor, again, on the right side is high, left side is low. Again, this is more comfort with making connections with others and working through processes, precision. On the right side here, over here is less formal, more adaptive, flexible formality. Also, another thing of when you're in an organization, understand, some people, some organizations are going to be very casual. As I talked about, you may have, CEO or owner or high-level person come to your desk and say hello to you, right? Or ask you about some point or data that you may be working on your project that they're aware of. On the other side, you may see that person walking by and they never make any kind of connection, right? So from your standpoint, understand, ask the questions. Who should I talk to? Where are the resources? How do I get in to meet a certain person? Do I call them directly? Do I email them? Or are you going to introduce me to someone? Right? Because if it's a formal organization and you're an intern and you call someone who's a VP or senior vice president, that might not be PC in that organization. Whereas another organization may be absolutely perfect and comfortable for you to reach to that level of a person in the organization. Your intern manager should be the person to go to, or this is kind of one of those things where you can call a coach and say, hey, here's my situation at work. what would you advise and, for me to handle X, Y, Z that I'm working on? Okay. So in your package, you have the 17 reference profiles. All of them have a diagram, right? And so one of the things that I would say to you, if you've done this as long as I've done it, for either predictive index or Myers-Briggs, you can listen to people's language and sometimes pick up on things that are important to them. Like someone who's constantly talking about, we need a plan, or I need a checklist, or I need an outline, right? That is going to be someone who's much more structured and in an organized fashion, right? Someone who says, let's connect and talk about something is going to be more informal and engaging, right? Because they're saying, hey, I don't need to have a structure. I just want to get together and talk about something so that we can then work through ideas, right? Someone who's talking about numbers and facts, those kinds of things is really going to be, again, more structured, much more analytical, right? So if you look at some of the, we go back to the, yeah, so these are the analytical profiles, but this is not the slide I wanted to get to. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to make the point I want on the slide. But again, as you're going into your internship opportunities, think about your style, be aware of your style and how you're naturally wired. That's why we gave you predictive index, right? Understand that and be clear about that, okay? Know what your, what I would call development areas or blind spots are, right? So know what those are and, be aware as you're going in to your assignments and the different projects, how you operate and then how to connect with your boss. Here's the flip side of things. You could be, a driving person and your boss could be a collaborative person, right? Those are two opposite ends of the spectrum. So the first thing is really kind of understanding where your boss is and where you are, right? I've worked for bosses who wanted written plans before we had a conversation about anything, right? That drove me absolutely nuts because I'm not a written plan person before I get into things. It really starts with ideas and concepts. That was a frustrating part that I had to learn with that particular boss, how to slow myself down and map out at least a structure of a plan to begin the conversation with that boss. Okay. So just really use this, read your behavior reports, understand again how you're wired, and if you have questions, you can always come back to any of the coaches. We can do refresher on your behavior reports. If there's questions that you have, those are things that we can definitely help you out with. Okay. So I did want to go through how are we doing on time? Yes, Carrie.
I have a question.
Yes.
So like, when we have our internships and even jobs afterwards, how do you know when to say, well, I have to do this certain task where I'm like on the opposite spectrum, so it'll be hard for me. How do you know when you're gonna have to like just sit down with yourself and be like, okay, I'm an introverted person, but I have these extroverted tasks. I need to mentally get together and do it? Versus when, like, how do you know when you can come to your boss and say, hey, my schedule is very stagnant and it works against my working style. Can you maybe change some things around so my schedule is a little more different week to week? How do you know when it's time to, go to your boss and say, hey, what if we change this to better adapt to my working style? Or, how do you know when it's kind of like, well, I just have to deal with this and figure out my own?
Well, I think, and, we have a couple other people in the room. For me, I think, first of all, bosses are super busy and short-staffed, right? So that's one thing everybody in the room needs to understand. Even if you're going into an internship, you're going in there to learn, they've committed to creating an environment to teach you, they're still very busy. Just about every job that exists in this country, I know for sure right now, used to be 2 jobs last year and maybe 5 jobs 10 years ago. So that's one thing. The second part of it is, I would say, the work, depending on the environment, could be based on what's going on for that company. So the customers are driving the workflow, right? The sales of the organization is driving the workflow, or the season, right? So for Sydney's on a project, her conference is at the end of June, which is next month. So it's coming fast, right? And so there's nothing you can really do about slowing that down because you've got a date, right? So if it's a company, it's a sales organization, or, it's, you're in a medical situation, you just understand like what's driving the timing, and sometimes you can figure that out, right? If it's a project that a boss is driving and they're in control of it, right? And it's flexible, then I'm probably going to guess, and I could be corrected, that if it has flexibility to the point where you could restructure it, it's not that important. Most really important things or have an emergent feeling to them, that it must be done now, it's on a timetable, we have to deliver something by a certain time frame, right? If we're very casual about things, most of the time, it's just in my world, it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter if we do it or we don't, then that's not a really critical project or critical work. Critical work, has some timetable that something must be done or there's some consequences to it. So I would say if you're, again, a part of a team, understand what that rhythm of the team is and then figure out how to get it. And then listen, these are all learning styles, right? So the reason we talk about how you're wired, it's just so you know how to internalize and push yourself, right? A lot of times we're wired a certain way and don't know that we're wired a certain way. We're just frustrated sometimes with the way work is presented. So if I know, right, how I'm wired and I can put systems in place to get myself to that level, then that's a better situation for me because I then feel like I'm in control. Even though it's frustrating, I'm still in control of how I respond to that situation, right? And so that's the nature of what is here, is being mindful about what the challenge is and what you're up against and dealing with it versus just the frustrating. Hold on a second, Dr. Ryan.
Are the interns supervisors going to take PI so we can match their PI with the intern so they can kind of see how their boss thinks and or functions?
In one model, we did have the supervisors of the candidate taking, but in some cases, the reality is in a work setting, they could have multiple people guiding them through it. So then that may be possible, but may not. The other part of it is, that, PI has some rules around, the data and who can get the data and that kind of stuff, so. But that was one of our models. We'll see if we can get there. But it would be an elective thing where the company decides they want to participate. So you just have to be careful about PIs.
That's a great point. One of the things that you are learning in this process is about PI and how it applies to you, but use your power of observation, what you see people do, the actions that they take, and the words that they use to kind of build those relationships with your supervisors to know if there can be a conversation that says, hey man, I need more work, I need less work, we need to change it up a little bit. But use that power of observation that you have to build those relationships and figure out where they would be on the PI index. Now we're just learning this, right? This is a new concept. So you're just trying to figure out where you fall on this behavioral scale and how it applies to you. But if you think about the people that you're working with and say, oh, you know what, they're an extrovert, they have less patience, they have more patience. You can kind of see that and kind of judge it for yourselves. But then remember, it's all about building relationships. So build those relationships where you feel comfortable having a conversation with your supervisor and they don't think you're trying to get out of work because now you've built that relationship and they know you. It's an internship, so it may be a short-term thing. So when you get in there, start kind of reading through the documentation you've been given, make those connections with people in the organization, get to know your supervisor. They're real busy, just like Perry says, so they may not have the time to sit down with you and have a conversation other than that one touch point. But just make sure that if you have any questions going in, that one touch point that you have with that supervisor is impactful for you, because you're going into the situation trying to put your best foot forward and then come out with a recommendation or a job for the future. So just every time you have an opportunity with a supervisor, make it impactful and just have something ready to ask about or say about the situation that you've been given the opportunity for.
Yeah. Carrie, did we answer your question? Yeah, 1 second. So the other thing I want to say to you is one of the principles of this program has been relevant experience to the career field of your choice, right? So we're not going out to say, hey, just let our people make copies and get coffee. We've gone to those employers and said, what is a internship that you're committed to that is real work and it is something that's going to develop their skill set, right? So we're asking for the lift, the heavy lift, right? We're asking because a light internship is not going to do anything for you when you're trying to interview for a full-time gig, right? The other piece of it is we want you to be operating and challenged on the same level of people in the full-time gig because we want them to say, this person, we need them on our team, right? We don't want to just have them for the summer as a plaything. We want them as a full-time because they can add value to our organization going forward, right? Remember my dream state, right? My dream state is that you get an offer at the end of your internship in your senior year, right? So that is the dream state, is that you don't have to interview after you graduated, that you have a job before you graduate, right? That's the work of getting you a bona fide internship that gives you that piece, and then you can demonstrate now that you could deliver on that, and you show the promise of being able to do those things, right? Most of the companies will say to us, and Gretchen and Dr. Meyer and Dr. G, all of us have been in companies looking for talent, and everybody says we need people with soft skills, right? Skills around emotional intelligence, right? Ability to communicate with other people, ability to work on teams, right? That is why we're talking about PI and talking about, you and how you are a part of the organization and how you show up there, right? It is to improve those skill sets there, right? So, the other last thing I'm gonna say, and then Dr. Meyer's gonna make a comment. Two things that most companies are looking for. Two biggest things: soft skills, your package of how do you connect with people, work with people, present yourself, all those kinds of things, communicate. Second thing, ability to problem solve. Every company has a problem that they're looking for someone to come in and help them solve that problem. Right? And so you're still in college, and yes, you're looking for experience, right? But how you demonstrate that you're ready for that career is helping that organization solve problems. Right? Right. You're taking your academic together with that experience and then creating saying what we say, we need you on our team, to be that team lead that's going to help us solve problems, right? So, Dr. Martin?
One thing that I can share with everybody, I usually, anytime that I have a new manager or manager that I'm reporting to, I will always ask them, can you tell me about your leadership style? Because that's important to understand, how their style of coaching you or how they interact, how they think. Because I've actually had a manager to tell me, because she was at the top, an HR manager, she said, look, I usually am very easygoing, but I just expect from you, if I ask you to do something, I expect for you to be an adult. All of us are adults, so I don't micromanage. So I'm not always gonna be, following up behind you. When I give you an assignment, I expect you to just send it to me. So some managers are pretty straightforward, some are laissez-faire. I have a tendency of having some issue with laissez-faire managers, only because I am structured.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, because I know how I am, I have to make sure to satisfy that manager based on their style. Because they're the ones signing, they have the pen. They sign whether I stay or go. So you have to be able to understand their style and talk their language. Since they're the ones who can decide whether to keep you, promote you, or, you're out. So.
Yep.
We got
4 minutes, okay. Other questions? So Kenneth, Mira, can we, in the very first class, I believe we had the PI sheets that had the words on them, that were based on the right or left and the sigmas? Yes, okay. So I want to just make sure everybody gets this, and so to that point, so we'll make sure you get this document, right? So I would use this document, right? So as you get the boss, right, and you start to work with that person, look at this. And start to identify the words that you would describe that person, right? After some observation, you can more than likely figure out what their profile is, right? You could figure out if they're high A, low A, high B, low B, right? You can figure that out by these words and how they show up, right? Because these are behaviors. This is language that describes something. And if you're observant and listen, you can figure that out without having someone say, okay, here is Marvell's report. I can kind of do this and go, yeah, I can figure that out for the most part, right? enough for me to then try to learn how to interact better with them. Right? That's the ticket for you, is to get that, to understand that manager. So Dr. Minor talked about the laissez-faire manager, right? You know, again, I'm not that structured, but I hate it if I have done a crap ton of work and then to find out it wasn't the right work, right? If there's anybody in here who loves doing a lot of work and then finding out it's good, then I don't know where you are, right? So checking in with the manager to say, hey, if the manager doesn't say, I want to meet with you next week for an update, you can say, hey, can I meet with you next week to show you where I am on this project, right? You can take control of that, right, yourself by asking. And if your manager says, well, I'm tied up next week, then you could say, is there somebody else who could look at my project and give me some direction? Right? Your thing is to try to get that input as soon as possible so you know where you are, so that you are then going forward, right? That is one of the principles of Agile, is to have constant sort of check-ins to validate the work, right? Before you continue to build on top of it, right? We don't want a Hard Rock hotel where we build it and we find out it's not structurally sound, right? So in your work, you can ask that manager for that check-in yourself. You don't have to wait to be told that. And again, remember your style. If your style is to be quiet and introverted and not ask a lot of questions, okay, you have to learn to manage your work by engaging people on a different level to make sure your performance is at the level that it needs to be, right? Oh, I'm out of time. That's the close it down signal. So, you know yourself, right? Know how you make decisions, know how you approach your work, right? And then we'll make sure you get this so you can have it in your database. And then you can just print these things out and use them as you go along to sort of help you figure out the people or the person that you're working with for the most part. All of your coaches, the newer ones aren't, but the older coaches are versed in PI and can help you work through some of those things, okay? All right, what's next on the agenda?
Lunch.
Lunch, time to eat.
No, we have 30 more minutes, unfortunately.
Oh, we do?
We
You have me.
Well, you're fun.
Can we eat
They
and
to get
listen
us
to you?
right into lunch.
12 to 12:30.
Huh? We're having sandwiches, aren't we?
Yeah.
Can we eat and listen to you? I'm hungry.
Y'all want to do
Everybody else
that?
hungry? Yes. See, Alyssa's clapping. Feed me.
Okay, well, let's take a break and
What's your business?
and
Oh,
eat.
can you have your picture back? Yes.
And then come back and listen to me talk about something really, really important. I have a great sermon for you all today. So yeah, Miss Mira is going to get everyone's lunches. So let's just take 2 minutes to wash our hands, get some sanitizer, get something to drink, and we'll start bringing out the sandwiches and salads to everybody. And then come back and I'll preach the greatest sermon you've ever heard.
Oh, I know, we're gonna listen to a Southern Baptist service.
Church of God in
Catholic
Christ.
service. Oh, Lord, Jesus. Okay.
So we'll be here for a while.
Party.
Did you bring out? Okay.
Miss Gretchen, I changed my mind. Which one?
No, Benicio.
They may be talking about it now. Okay.
She changed her mind. Could you do a 12 point?